All right, we are going to talk about three main exposure controls: shutter speed, aperture, and film speed. Now, every camera is different. My film speed, you can see back here, is set to 400. Oftentimes, you might see a little lever up here or a knob, and it might say the letters ISO or ASA. That is referring to film speed. So we're going to be using 400 speed film, so you need to have this set at 400. The other two that we're really going to spend time talking about is shutter speed and aperture. So right here, this ring that I'm moving closest to my camera body, this is my aperture ring, okay? And I want you to notice some of the numbers. This is 1.7 all the way to 22, okay? And what I want you to think about is that little numbers mean big things, okay? When we are talking about aperture, that is the size of the hole inside our lens, okay? And that's really controlling how much light is able to come into the camera. So I'm going to actually open up the back of my camera so that you can see the aperture change. So here is my shutter, and here's my shutter release button. I'm going to press and hold, and now you can see the white of the paper underneath, and there's my hand, okay? Now notice that this is a shutter speed of 1.7, okay? Little numbers mean big things, okay? That's a very large aperture. Versus, I'm gonna turn it all the way to f22, and I'm gonna open it, and you can barely even see that little hole. I'm gonna move my hand back and forth so you can see it, okay? So when I move my aperture, you can see that the opening in the lens goes from really, really small to really, really big. Now, a larger aperture like this, with a 1.7 or 2.8 or a 4, you would use an aperture like that when it's more of a low light setting, okay? So think about this. The hole is very, very large. It's going to let lots and lots of light in, and we need lots of light if we're in a low light setting to make our exposure correct, versus an aperture that's maybe a 16 or 11 or a 22. It's teeny tiny. This is more for a bright light setting. Because there is an abundance of light, we have to control how much is able to enter the camera body, okay? So there's aperture. Now on the top of my camera speed, oftentimes you might have a little knob up here. Mine goes in numbers. You'll see 15, 30, 60, 125, 250, 500, to 1,000, and then I have auto, okay? Now this is your shutter speed. Remember, we talked already that this little black trapdoor, that is your shutter, okay? So the shutter speed means how quickly that little trapdoor, the shutter, is actually opening. So I'm gonna show you a really fast shutter speed. That's set at 1,000. So I'm going to advance my film, and now watch this. Watch down at the white paper, you'll see it, the opening flash. Barely, right? You can barely even see it. Okay, now I'm going to change my aperture to 1.7 so we can hopefully see it a little bit bigger, and I'm gonna have a much slower shutter speed. I'm gonna do 30. Okay, now watch. Okay, you saw that the shutter release was a lot slower, and enough that we were able to see the white of the paper down here, okay? So your shutter speed, again, is how long or how short this little trapdoor, the shutter, stays open,